I'm going to describe a way to die, and I want you to guess how common it is in a real societal collapse. A man survives the first 2 weeks of grid down. He's got food, water, a firearm, and enough ammo to make a small militia jealous. He's doing everything right. Then one morning, he finds a patch of wild mushrooms near a creek bed. Pulls out the foraging guide he bought on Amazon. 4.8 stars, the one every prepper forum recommended. He cross-references. He's confident. Cooks them up. Best meal he's had since the lights went out. Dead by sunrise. Not from raiders, not from dehydration, not from a gunfight over canned goods. From dinner. That's not fiction. That's documented data from the Soviet collapse of 1992, when newly impoverished Russians turned to foraging and mushroom poisoning fatalities went through the roof. Now here's the part that should bother you. Every prepper channel on this platform, including this one because I believe in honesty, spends 90% of its airtime on gunfights, tactical gear, and bug-out routes. The sexy stuff. But when you pull the mortality data from real collapses, Bosnia, Venezuela, post-Katrina, the Soviet Union, Argentina, the pattern is identical every time. Less than 4% of civilian deaths come from gunfights. 4%. I'll let that sink in for a second. The thing the entire prepper industry is built around, the gunfight, the standoff, the tactical scenario where your training and your gear save the day, accounts for a statistical footnote in actual collapse mortality. It's the equivalent of spending your entire life savings on shark repellent while living next to a highway. So if your entire prep budget goes to ammunition and plate carriers, you've been training for a final boss that almost never shows up while ignoring the 7 mini-bosses that statistically end you. Today I'm walking you through those 7, ranked from okay, that tracks to there is absolutely no way that's real. Number 7 is going to rewire how you think about survival entirely. Here's the rule for this entire video. Rule number 1 of the real apocalypse. The thing that kills you is the thing you never thought to prepare for. Not the dramatic thing. The boring, stupid, humiliating thing that never made your threat assessment because it didn't look cool enough. A rotten tooth? A stray dog? Your own buddy? Let's get into it. Your body is not your buddy. Let's start with one that's going to hit uncomfortably close to home. Because the risk factor isn't out there in the wasteland. It's the body you're sitting in right now. The average American takes 3,700 steps per day. That's less than 2 miles. 60% of adults don't meet the CDC's minimum physical activity level. And the dominant prepper demographic, men 30 to 55 desk jobs, sits right in that statistic. Now think about what collapse actually demands. Day 1, you're hauling water. 40 pounds per trip if you're doing it right. Day 2, chopping wood because the heat's out and it's February. Day 3, walking 6 miles to your cache site because your truck is decorative now. Day 4, sprinting. We'll get to why later. Your body has been in power save mode for a decade. Overnight, it's expected to perform like an 1850s field laborer. And it can't. Cardiovascularly, structurally, it cannot. During Hurricane Katrina, cardiac events spiked during and immediately after evacuation. Sedentary people hit with simultaneous physical exertion and extreme psychological stress. Hearts gave out. In the Soviet collapse, working-age Russian men saw a massive spike in cardiovascular mortality as living conditions cratered overnight. Male life expectancy dropped 7 years in under a decade, not from war, from bodies that couldn't adapt to the new operating conditions fast enough. Be honest with yourself right now. When's the last time you ran a mile? Not jogged, ran. Because in collapse, running a mile is the minimum distance between you and a house fire, a flash flood, or a group that wants your supplies. If your cardiovascular system redlines at minute 3, your $3,000 bug-out bag doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to whoever finds your body next to it. There's a bitter irony nobody talks about. Guys spend $900 on a rifle optic but won't spend 30 minutes 3 times a week on a treadmill. Your survival loadout weighs 60 pounds. Can you carry it 5 miles at pace right now, today? If not, it's not a survival kit. It's a donation to whoever's in better shape. And here's the cascade problem. A cardiac event doesn't just remove you, it drains everyone around you. You need care, resources, medical attention that doesn't exist anymore. One person's heart attack turns the whole group into a field hospital with no supplies. In a world where every calorie and every hour is accounted for, the person who can't carry their own weight isn't just a liability. They're a crisis. But at least a heart attack kills fast. The next one takes its sweet time. Starts small, hurts a little, and 14 days later you're septic. All because you never once thought of your mouth as a survival system. The 14-day death clock in your jaw pop quiz. What item is missing from 95% of prepper bug-out bags despite being tied to a cause of death that killed more people than combat wounds in every war before 1928? Dental antibiotics. Before penicillin, a dental abscess was a routine path from toothache to coffin. Ludwig's angina, a dental infection spreading through the jaw and neck, could block your airway or dump bacteria into your bloodstream. Untreated mortality, north of 50%. That was the status quo for all of human history until about 95 years ago. Here's your 14-day timeline, and I want you to feel every stage of this, because it's the kind of slow-motion disaster that doesn't make it into action movies. Days 1 through 3. That molar that's been sensitive when you drink something cold, it starts throbbing. You've got water to purify and a perimeter to maintain. A toothache isn't a priority. You push through. Days 4 through 7. Constant pain, cheek swelling, low fever. Eating is agony on that side. Worse, your decision-making is degrading from pain and sleep loss. And in a survival scenario, every decision you make has consequences. Days 7 through 10. The infection breaches the tooth and enters soft tissue, spreading through your jaw. In normal life, this is an ER visit and IV antibiotics. In collapse, this is where you realize your prep plan has a hole the size of a molar. Days 10 through 14. Sepsis, bacteria in the bloodstream, organs failing in sequence. Without IV antibiotics in a sterile environment, mortality is catastrophic. You've got 3 different fire-starting methods in your bag and 0 ways to treat an abscessed tooth. Right now, 1 in 3 American adults has an untreated cavity. CDC data, normal life, a dental bill you keep postponing. Grid down, a countdown. The American Civil War is instructive here. Dental problems were among the top reasons soldiers reported to field hospitals, more common than bullet wounds in many units. In Venezuela, right now, today, when the healthcare system collapsed, dental infections became a documented cause of preventable death. People with smartphones dying from toothaches. That's not the dark ages, that's 2024. You've got 17 methods to purify water in your kit. How many fish antibiotics do you have? Do you own a dental emergency kit? Can you do a field extraction? Do you even have oil of cloves? Death by toothache. Sounds medieval because it is. We're one sustained supply chain disruption from being right back there. At least your teeth are in your mouth, a threat you can identify if you think to look. The next killer actively disguises itself as salvation, and it tastes great. The forager's graveyard. Here's a scenario from prepper forums that makes me want to scream. Guy buys a foraging guidebook, watches a 12-minute YouTube video from some dude in flannel identifying plants in a national park. Now he's convinced he can feed himself when the supply chain breaks. He's Aragorn. He's Bear Grylls without the camera crew. He is going to die. Soviet Union, 1991. The economy imploded and millions were suddenly on their own for food. Many turned to the forests. Mushroom foraging had deep cultural roots. Grandmothers had done it for generations. But the generation forced to forage wasn't the grandmothers. It was their grandchildren, running on secondhand knowledge and overconfidence. Mushroom poisoning fatalities exploded. Russia still has one of the highest rates in the world, and that statistical legacy started during the collapse. Let me introduce you to your killer, Amanita phalloides, the death cap. It looks nearly identical to several species that experienced foragers actively seek out. No bitter taste, no warning smell. Pleasant flavor. Some survivors described it as genuinely enjoyable. You eat it, you feel fine for 6 to 12 hours, maybe even optimistic. Then the amatoxins start destroying your liver. Within 24 hours, acute liver failure. Hospital treatment involves aggressive IV therapy and possibly a transplant. Field camp treatment involves dying over 3 to 5 days in extraordinary pain. And here's the kicker. It's not hiding in some remote jungle. Death caps grow across North America, near oak trees, in parks, in suburban backyards. It's in your neighborhood right now. But mushrooms aren't the only trap. Hemlock, yes, the one that killed Socrates, looks almost identical to wild carrot. Death commas and wild onion are nearly indistinguishable by leaf. One seasons your stew, the other stops your heart. These aren't exotic edge cases. These are the most common foraging targets crossed with the most common foraging deaths. The Dunning-Kruger effect makes this exponentially worse. A little knowledge doesn't make you safe. It makes you confidently dangerous. The person who watched 3 videos is a bigger risk than the person who watched 0, because they believe they know enough. Expert foragers with decades of field time still make identification errors. Your laminated card from a weekend workshop doesn't stand a chance. Every year, with hospitals open and poison control a phone call away, the US records over 7,000 mushroom poisoning cases. Remove those safety nets, add desperation, add the pressure to feed a family. And that number doesn't rise, it detonates. And it's not just wild food. After a collapse, industrial contamination controls cease. Water treatment plants go offline. Factory runoff goes unchecked. That crystal-clear creek running through the woods might look like a survival resource, but it could be running past an unmonitored industrial site upstream. The fish might be saturated with heavy metals. The watercress growing along the bank might be absorbing chemicals you can't see, smell, or taste. Nature doesn't come with a nutrition label, and in collapse, there's nobody testing it for you. Then there's the prepper who decides to go full frontier doctor with herbal medicine. Saw it on a homesteading blog. Figured foxglove is basically the same as the heart medication it was derived from. It is, in the same way that a stick of dynamite is basically the same as a firecracker. Dosage is everything, and eyeballing it with bioactive plants is a fast track to organ failure. At least mushrooms stay in one place and wait for you to make a mistake. The next threat comes to you, in packs, at night, and it used to sleep at the foot of your neighbor's bed. When man's best friend goes off leash, permanently, 2 weeks after Katrina, the streets of New Orleans had a new apex predator. Not looters, not gangs, 50,000 abandoned dogs. During evacuation, tens of thousands of owners left animals behind. Within weeks, pack dynamics took over, and packing changes everything. A single stray dog is manageable, but dogs are social predators by ancestry. In groups, you don't have 20 individual dogs. You have a coordinated hunting unit with combined body weight exceeding 1,000 pounds, hunger-driven, operating primarily at night. Rescue workers documented aggressive encounters with feral packs throughout New Orleans. Same pattern during the siege of Sarajevo. Same in Chernobyl within years of evacuation. There are 90 million pet dogs in America right now. In any widespread collapse, most are abandoned within weeks. Your subdivision alone has enough to form multiple packs. That golden retriever 3 doors down, 6 weeks without food and socialization, it's not your kid's friend anymore. It's a predator that knows your yard. And here's the tactical problem nobody game plans. Your rifle handles 1, maybe 2. The rest scatter and come back after dark, every night. Because your camp, your food, your trash, that's their territory now. You're not fighting off a raid, you're living inside the hunting ground of animals that smell your food from a quarter mile and see better than you in the dark. But dogs are just the opening act. When human infrastructure retreats, everything else advances. 30,000 black bears east of the Mississippi, currently kept away by noise and traffic. Remove all of that. A 400-pound omnivore can smell your kitchen from over a mile and rip the door off to get in. 6 million feral hogs in the southern states, 300 pounds. Tusks, aggressive, pack hunting, already out of control. After collapse with no wildlife management, they own everything south of the Mason-Dixon line. When garbage collection stops, rodent populations detonate within weeks. Rats don't just eat your food. They carry hantavirus, leptospirosis, and plague. The disease that killed 1/3 of Europe came from the same rats that'll thrive in your post-collapse neighborhood. And mosquitoes. Every city runs abatement programs that stop on day 1 of collapse. Malaria was endemic in the American South until the 1950s. It was eradicated because of public health programs, not because the mosquito species disappeared. They're still there, right now. The only barrier between you and malaria is a government program that doesn't exist in your collapse scenario. Everyone preps for the raider with a rifle. Nobody preps for 40 feral pit bulls at 3 a.m., a sounder of hogs through the garden fence, or the mosquito carrying a disease your state hasn't seen since your grandparents were kids. At least animals are external. You can see them, fight them, fence against them. The next killer comes from inside your own body, and the cruelest part is the timing. It kills you at the exact moment you think you've been saved. Now, before we get to number 5, I need to hit pause and give you a reality check. Because I can feel some of you building a mental shopping list right now. Get in shape. Buy fish antibiotics, throw away the foraging book, reinforce the fence. Good instincts, all of that is actionable. But here's what I need you to internalize. The first 4 killers on this list are problems with solutions. Hard solutions, but solutions. You can train. You can stock medical supplies. You can avoid unknown plants. You can fortify against animals. They're physical problems in a physical world. The next 3 operate in a completely different category. They exploit the gaps between your plans. They weaponize your own instincts, your relationships, and your neurochemistry. There is no Amazon purchase that fixes what's coming next. This is where the real apocalypse begins. Not when the grid fails, but when your own systems start working against you. The meal that murders you. This one sounds made up. It isn't. It's called refeeding syndrome, and it has killed people who were, by every objective measure, rescued. They survived the starvation, then they died because someone handed them a plate. The scenario: 3 weeks into collapse. Food has been scarce. You've rationed, stretched, made do. Lost 20 pounds, but you're alive. Then a breakthrough. An untouched storage unit full of canned goods. Your group celebrates. Some people are crying. You eat until you're full for the first time in 21 days. Best meal of your life. Your heart stops 18 hours later. From eating, here's the mechanism: prolonged starvation, as little as 7 to 10 days of severe restriction, restructures your metabolism at a fundamental level. Your electrolyte balance, the precise concentrations of phosphorus, magnesium, and potassium that keep your heart in rhythm, recalibrates for famine mode. Then you eat, aggressively. Insulin spikes, driving those remaining electrolytes into your cells. Blood levels crash, and without those electrolytes coordinating your cardiac rhythm, arrhythmia, respiratory failure, seizures, death. 24 to 72 hours. This is not theoretical. When Allied forces liberated Nazi concentration camps in 1945, they gave survivors food. Some of those survivors died, not from captivity, from rescue. The meals that were supposed to save them triggered this exact cascade. It was so widespread that it drove the research that identified and named the syndrome. The Minnesota starvation experiment documented the same mechanisms under controlled conditions. In modern hospitals, with IV electrolyte replacement, careful protocols, and monitoring, refeeding syndrome still develops in up to 34% of malnourished patients. That's with doctors and equipment. In a field camp with no medical supplies and a group of starving people staring at real food for the first time in 3 weeks, the rate is catastrophic. Because the biological trap is perfect. The natural response to prolonged hunger, eat as much as you can, as fast as you can, is exactly the trigger that kills you. The correct protocol is slow reintroduction over days, starting with small amounts, gradually increasing. It means telling desperate, crying, exhausted people to eat half a cracker and wait 4 hours. Who in your group knows this? Who's even heard of it? Every prepper has a plan for when food runs out. Nobody has a plan for when food comes back. Refeeding kills with hope. The cruelest illusion that the worst is over. But at least it's biology, impersonal, chemical. The next killer is none of those things. It's personal, emotional, and it comes from the person standing next to you. The enemy inside the perimeter. Every prepper plan shares one core assumption. The threat is out there. Marauders, gangs, the faceless horde. Good guys inside the wire, bad guys outside. Every piece of collapse data says the opposite. The person most likely to kill you is someone you already know. Siege of Sarajevo. A significant portion of civilian violent deaths came not from enemy combatants but from neighbors. People who had lived on the same street, whose kids went to the same schools. When resources hit a certain threshold of scarcity, social contracts didn't erode, they evaporated. Post-Katrina, the majority of looting was committed by local residents, not outsiders. Argentina, 2001. Theft, violence, betrayal, overwhelmingly between people who knew each other. Now put this in your 5-person prepper group. Week 1 goes fine. Shared threat creates solidarity. You're a team. Week 3 is different. Food's tighter than projected. Somebody's eating more than their share. Everyone knows. Nobody says anything because the group feels fragile. Resentment builds like carbon monoxide, invisible, odorless, approaching lethal concentration. Then someone speaks up. And suddenly it's not about food, it's about respect, contribution, leadership. Every unspoken grievance since day 1 detonates simultaneously. Your group has no court system, no police. Conflict resolution comes down to persuasion, intimidation, or force. Let me give you a specific scenario. 5 people, 3 weeks in. One member, call him Dave, has been eating more than his ration. Maybe consciously, maybe stress eating without realizing it. Doesn't matter. Everyone's noticed. Days of silence, then a confrontation. Dave gets defensive, voices rise. Now it's not about the extra can of beans. It's about who contributed more at the start. About who's been pulling their weight on watch. About a comment someone made on day 4 that nobody forgot. Day 31, supplies go missing. Dave says it wasn't him. Evidence is circumstantial. Trust is gone. Day 32, your carefully planned survival group becomes a crime scene. Not because Dave was a bad person. Because normal humans under sustained resource scarcity become unrecognizable, including you. Resource disputes. I brought more. I work harder. My kids need more. All valid. none resolvable without surplus that doesn't exist. Leadership fractures. Two people think they're in charge. They disagree on something critical, and the group doesn't compromise. It splits. Paranoia. Sleep deprivation plus caloric restriction plus constant threat produces paranoid thinking in psychologically normal humans. Not mentally ill, normal. He's hiding food. She's planning to leave. In survival, the cost of misplaced trust is death, so the brain defaults to suspicion. It's not a bug, it's a feature. The wrong feature for group cohesion. And then the scenario, nobody game plans. A group member is badly hurt. Needs care, water, food, medicine the group can't spare. Not going to recover without help that doesn't exist. Every day they consume resources that could keep someone else alive. That conversation happens. It's the worst conversation humans can have. And whatever the group decides, the group that existed before that conversation is gone forever. Your group can kill you with a blade, a vote, or by simply walking away and leaving you behind. But the final entry on this list needs no weapon, no group, no reason. It reaches inside your skull, flips a switch, and waits. And it's the most terrifying thing I've ever researched for this channel. The man who turned his face to the wall. The final entry has a medical name, psychogenic death. Military psychologists call it give-up-itis, a documented, peer-reviewed phenomenon where a human being decides below conscious thought to stop living, and the body obeys. This is not depression, though depression can precede it. Not suicide, though the outcome is identical. This is the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain's motivational headquarters, functionally shutting down. The dopamine system collapses. The body doesn't fight, it simply stops trying. Dr. John Leach identified 5 stages. Social withdrawal. Conversations become monosyllabic. It looks like introversion. It isn't. Apathy. Hygiene abandoned. They stop eating with food available. Stop drinking water within arm's reach. Not because they can't, because the circuit that makes you reach for the cup has gone dark. Abulia. Loss of will. The ability to make any decision, even trivial ones, disappears. Psychic akinesia. Total unresponsiveness. Pain doesn't register. Danger doesn't register. You can shout, shake them, place a direct threat in front of them. Nothing. Death. 3 to 4 days after stage 4. Autopsy reveals no definitive cause. No organ failure, no disease, no injury. The machine stopped because the operator left. Korean War. American POWs soldiers who were not physically worse off than their companions would find a corner, pull a blanket overhead, stop talking, stop eating. Dead in 2 to 3 days. The other prisoners called them the men who turned their faces to the wall. Once someone turned, nobody could turn them back. Documented in shipwreck survivors, disaster aftermath, concentration camps, hostage situations. The common thread isn't physical extremity, it's psychological defeat. The moment the brain concludes there's no exit, the body begins an orderly shutdown, not a breakdown. A shutdown. Systematic, quiet. Anthropologist Walter Cannon documented the same mechanism in a completely different context back in the 1940s, what he called voodoo death. Individuals in certain communities who believed they had been cursed would physically die within days, with no toxin and no injury. The mechanism was identical. The brain decided the situation was terminal, and the body followed the instruction. Different culture, different trigger, same neurological off switch. Your brain doesn't need a curse to flip it. 3 weeks of darkness, isolation, and zero certainty will do the job just fine. Here's why this is the final entry. Every other killer on this list has a countermeasure. Train your body, stock dental supplies, avoid wild plants, fortify against animals, learn the refeeding protocol, build group conflict frameworks. All of those have a preparation, a protocol, something you can do. You cannot stockpile the will to live. The research on prolonged collapse survival identifies the same decisive factor across every culture and context studied. Not fitness, not supplies, not tactical skill. Purpose. A reason to keep going that's stronger than the rational voice telling you it's hopeless. A person to protect. A responsibility to fulfill. A mission that won't let you sit down. Something that keeps the motivational circuits firing when every external signal says quit. The POW camp survivors weren't the toughest. They had someone to get home to. The shipwreck survivors who lasted weren't the strongest. They decided they weren't done. The Bosnians who endured the siege weren't the best armed. They were embedded in communities that gave them reason to stay functional. This is the conversation the prepper community refuses to have. Every forum, every expo, every channel focuses on the physical. What to buy, what to build, what to carry. Nobody is talking about what happens to your mind after week 3 of no electricity, no information, no certainty, and no end in sight. Nobody is talking about purpose architecture, deliberately building the psychological scaffolding that prevents your brain from starting the shutdown sequence. And Gunfights isn't just a standalone killer, it's a force multiplier for everything else on this list. The person whose motivational circuits are dimming doesn't check their water, doesn't ration, doesn't maintain shelter, makes one bad decision, then another. Then one of the first 6 killers finishes what Gunfights started.